Streaming services are on the rise, and brick-and-mortar video stores are a thing of the past. We have lost that experience of wandering the aisles and stumbling upon a film we've never heard of. We have replaced the familiar face behind the video store counter with an algorithm to recommend films. With more and more content available, it's harder to know what's worth watching and what might be a waste of your time. There are many hidden gems out there waiting to be discovered, and we want to help you find them. This is Trailer Rewind, a podcast where we discuss and review recently forgotten or overlooked films that are now available to stream at home. In today's Trailer Rewind, we're starting our next trio of films. We are going to be talking about 2018's The Hummingbird Project.
How straight are we talking about here?
Whatever's in the way, we got to dig through. It's got to be a totally straight line.
Mountains?
Straight.
Rivers?
Straight.
Swamps? Straight.
Straight.
Can I ask what the purpose of that line is?
Our purpose is to get the stock market quotes in like 16 milliseconds, which is 1 millisecond faster than everybody else right now.
Okay. Then what happens?
Roughly $500 million a year.
Why didn't you go to Evatora's?
Evatora's uses human beings like disposable assets.
I can make your life hell if I decide to.
You want to buy a 12-inch strip off of my property?
Under your property.
It looks like they're building a fiber line between CAX and the New York Stock Exchange. I know, Jenny. I am looking at it. We're gonna do this in less.
I already told you we can't.
Oh, yes, we can.
Do you think she's trying to build her own line?
I just made $500,000 in 5 seconds.
We can't let her beat us.
I'm doing everything I can!
Tell me your dream, buddy.
Country home on a hill, small road, hummingbirds.
All right, say it again.
Country home on a hill, small road, hummingbirds.
I know you can do it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Somebody rigged our network.
Mr. Zaleski. Mr. Zaleski, stop.
You betrayed me. Now you have to pay.
Why is she putting up cell towers?
They're trying to screw us. I'm gonna tear you down. I'm going into my meeting right now, but I'll call you in 2 or 3 hours. Could you send all the paperwork over to my office? I'd love to have this done by the end of the day. Just think of it as David walking onto the floor of the stock exchange, taking out the biggest slingshot ever, and bringing Goliath down to his knees.
We're David.
Yeah, we're David.
Today is April 13th, and The Hummingbird Project is available on Netflix. The Hummingbird Project was released into theaters in the spring of 2019, and here in the U.S., it opened on 4 theaters, JJ. 4 theaters on March 15th.
4.
Wow. Yes, with this kind of cast, with Salma Hayek, with Jesse Eisenberg, with
it's kind of
Alexander Skarsgård, we're going to open on 4 theaters. But they expanded to 41 theaters the following week, and then it soared up to 232 theaters in its 3rd week of release.
So it actually got released in week 3.
Yes, and then 1 month before, it lasted 1 more month, and then flew away with a whopping $371,000, with an additional $500,000 from the rest of the world, leaving us with a project that pulled in less than $1 million. It was available digitally on June 11th, and then the typical 2 weeks later, hitting Blu-ray on June 25th, 2019. So this is a film in another era that I feel like I would have discovered it on cable TV and feel like I discovered something like special because it has these recognizable faces. And from the trailer, it's like this whole setup of this like scam or con or some big elaborate like heist type plan, right?
I watched the trailer too, and they called it a thriller. Mm-hmm. They called it a thriller, and they called it something else. I think I didn't even know about it. I wasn't aware of the film before we set it up to talk about today. But I feel like they promoted this movie incorrectly. I don't think it was what they said it was. And I don't know if that's what led to the disappointing performance, because like we mentioned, the cast is great. And there's a lot of elements to it. But the idea that it's about a scam or a con or it's a thriller, I think misses the point of what the story is definitely trying to say, and then really what the art of the movie comes out to be. I think you say you would have felt like you discovered something special. I think the movie is kind of something special. I think it definitely deserves talking about.
Well, so if it's not a thriller, and we're going to talk about, who would we recommend this to? What type of film is this? All of, these things up front. I mean, last episode, we talked about Papillon and how prison break movie that wasn't really about a prison break. Here, I don't think this is a thriller.
Is that the group of three that you put us in here? Movies that are not what they're billed to be?
But this does get into what it is, which is something else. And, I don't think there's a lot of ways to spoil this movie per se. But I think to say up front, it's not so much about... like the con or the scam. It's not like an Ocean's 11 thing where it's like, do we have a bunch of smart guys that have gone off independent and they're going to bring down the big corporation, or they're going to do, it's not that type of thing. Although it seems like that's what they're trying to market it as. It's something else about technology, the stock market, the pursuit of money, and I think the economics of that and the people involved in it. And it's a smarter film than I expected because it does ask some questions. It doesn't necessarily give all the answers, but it goes in a very different direction. And I feel like there was this nugget of a movie, and then either they had to play up for the financing or something to get that movie made to, hey, we're going to sell this as this Jesse Eisenberg, versus Salma Hayek, corporate espionage type of film. And it's not, right? It's more introspective.
And I mean, there's parts of it that feel like Michael Clayton, right?
Yes,
there's part of it that does that, and it's not as good as Michael Clayton, but it is good, and it has a different message. I think the last thing that you said in that list of things that you were talking about is the value of money or what money means, and I think that's really what this kind of gets to. I think what it's a drama. And people should approach it as it's a drama that is an interesting story that is about the value of money versus the value of life, and really the idea of a passion project and how much passion, obsession, whatever you want to say, it takes to get something done and what that means to someone's life. So it's one of those stories that's about life. So if we talk about who to recommend it to, especially the people who are looking for good stories that are not in the sort of popcorn setting of a bunch of effects, a bunch of, sci-fi or effects or all those kind of things, but are looking for a good story that's going to help them consider something about life. And I like these kind of movies. That's right in a great spot for me. And that's why when you say you feel like you would have discovered something special, that this pops into that vibe for me. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but it's definitely one of those that when you find, you're going to be like, oh, I wish I would have known more about that before I sat down. Yeah,
it's really about, I guess, like personal legacy, those types of things of like, what is your life worth and what do you accomplish in that, and asking those questions or giving the audience an opportunity to reflect on that. And that's why I think, if I imagine a younger version of myself coming across this and thinking I'm going to get this sort of like popcorn thriller action, thing, and getting something that would cause me to think, to ask myself some big questions, I can imagine, that being really unexpected and being a thrill. And I think that's what I would encourage people, that like those types of movies, although it's not heavy. And that's the thing I would say is it's not heavily philosophical, introspective. It's not going to set you off like, down a path of like, I have to really reflect on my life. But I guess it's the light version of that of, hey, we've got a character that you may be rooting for, and he's going to go through some things and he's going to ask himself some questions, and gives you that opportunity to reflect. And so I'd say it's like an intro into something heavier. I think Michael Clayton is a really good comparison. Not at that level, but sort of in that same, it's a drama that seems to be about one thing, but it's got a lot more things about human nature to it.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point that you bring up that it's not heavy, because it's not. It didn't make me emotionally, sort of weepy at any points in the film, even though the sort of tragic things were happening. I did feel excited. I did get emotional in other ways, but I never got choked up with the movie. So it isn't heavy in that way, but it still has the kind of weight that's going to make you, like you said, ask those questions about life. And that's kind of a neat little spot for a movie like this to hold. I think it's a good place. It's definitely one that I will recommend, especially in the world of what we've done in Trailer Rewind. It's got some value to it for sure.
So where did it end up sort of in your ranking and ratings? Because this is one that was in a weird place for me. So because like we said, it's got these elements. It's not great, but it does stand out. So I'm curious where that sort of falls for you.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's going to sound like it's much higher than it is when you get to the numbers, but it came in as 89 out of 251 for me on Flickchart. But that sounds like it's really high, but that actually comes in as a 3-star ranking, and that's exactly how I felt about the movie. So it seems really consistent. The interesting thing for me is that my middle block right now is Prometheus, which I think it's really easy for me to say that I like this instead of Prometheus. And when we talk about the effects and all those kind of things like that, it came up against some weird stuff in there. It came up against Disney's Robin Hood. It came up against some really odd ones to judge this against. But ultimately, at 89, it sits just below Contagion, which is the Steven Soderbergh movie about the pandemic,
yes.
Or a pandemic, I should say. And Soderbergh's my favorite director, so that was easy to kind of say it was less than this. But and just above, The Trial of the Chicago 7, which is Oscar-nominated film that we did for the Film Board last year in 2020. So that felt really accurate as far as where this movie sits for me. A little bit better than that, and a little bit worse than the Soderbergh.
So
How about you?
Ended up it came in at 3 stars for me as well, which I think is sort of
nice. Same.
On Discord, there was a conversation about a movie I had rated, and somebody asked me a question about where did the stars fall for you? Because there seemed to be a discrepancy between my written review and the number of stars. And Pete likes to say, he'll start at 5 stars, and then at what point did the stars start falling off? For me, I think I start at 3 stars, right. And then if it surprises me, then it can earn stars, and if it starts losing ground, it's going to drop. So for me, I come in at 3, sure. And if it doesn't do anything great, it'll stay at 3. If it doesn't do anything catastrophically bad that frustrates me or angers me, then it stays at 3. And this is one of those where, I really enjoyed it, so it stayed at 3. There was nothing that I felt elevated it. It was a competent movie and did some really interesting things within the genre, but nothing that I moves it towards being a classic. And in my overall rating over on Flickchart, it came in just slightly above the halfway point. It came in at 321 of 718 at 55%, and it ended up in a really weird place. So it's just above It Chapter 2, which is, again, in this middle ground, and then just below a movie from the 60s starring Rock Hudson called Seconds, which is it's a really sort of interesting sci-fi about people sort of getting a second chance at life. But here's what you might find interesting. At 323, so just 2 spots below it, is Demolition. So I've got it slightly above Demolition. I know I think you have Demolition ranked a little bit higher than I do, but I feel like it's in that range.
It's in my top 20 for sure. It might even be in my top 10. But Demolition's a movie about grief during a time when I really was looking for a movie about grief. So that makes sense. But
so
that's interesting.
That's where it sort of falls for me. Over on Letterboxd, it has an average review of 2.91 based on
that's the same. That's
based
what
on
we're saying.
A little over 4,000 reviews, and over at IMDb, a rating of 6.2. So again, right around that same place from 12,000 ratings. Yep. So it's, again, I think the general consensus is this is right in that middle zone of 3-star films. So listeners, if you think this is your kind of film and don't want anything spoiled, this is your chance to pause this podcast and go check out The Hummingbird Project on Netflix. All right, JJ, how do we dig into The Hummingbird Project? Because I feel like if we could go through the narrative, from beginning to end. I don't know if that's going to give us everything we need to talk about this, because in the intro we talked about that the trailer sets it up as this thriller, but to me it's so much more that I feel like we really need to jump into the middle to latter half of the movie to get into what it's really about, and we can talk about the context from things earlier on. Otherwise I feel like we'll get just bogged down in there's the setup of all of these things. I mean, the general premise to start is, I guess to summarize everything in the beginning, is these guys work for basically a trading company, it's trading stocks and all that. They've got a plan to beat the game by being faster. And that entails building a straight, like fiber optic, line from Kansas City in a straight line to New York. So going through mountains, hills, everything, and they'll be able to be 1 millisecond faster than everybody else. And so that's their plan to make all this money, is if they can get in on these trades just that much faster, they'll do that. And they have issues with the place they work for. They're not appreciated, et cetera, et cetera. That's the whole setup. But as we get into the middle and the end of the film, it reveals itself to be about something much more than that. What would you use to describe, or how would you describe what you think this film is really about or saying? So
it's really interesting because it takes a turn that you kind of expect it coming, because, our main character, which is Jesse Eisenberg, playing Vincent, we learn fairly early on in the film, maybe at the first third, at the end of the first act, that he is diagnosed with stomach cancer, and he's not telling anyone, and he's consistently, suffering from these pieces. So you expect something is going to happen with the stomach cancer as it goes. What you don't expect is this entire passion project, what you just described, this sort of pipeline that they're going to build. You don't expect that is going to not be important once he succumbs to the cancer, which I think is the big turn, because so much of the movie is bent on this corporate race between the cousins and their employer, and then really what it is about nothing related to that race at all. The race is completely irrelevant to what the film is trying to talk about. So I think about, when you ask the question, what is it about, I actually reflect to the first scene, which is set up with a beautiful transition of an overhead shot of the equipment that they're pulling across country, a direct overhead shot, looks like it's shot with a drone, and then it slowly sort of pans away from that and goes onto land, and somewhere in this digital transition, it becomes the ground, and then the tile that leads up to a live two-person shot of Jesse Eisenberg and his financier talking about why the financial person should trust him. And he tells this story that, to be honest, when I watched the movie, I thought he was lying.
Yes.
I thought he was just telling a story to get this guy to give him money. But as you go into the story is about this, his dad was a plumber and an immigrant, and, and all these things this vision that he had about hold the line and all these pieces. And throughout the film, they give us lots of this line symbolism and all these different artful pieces about this. And what it really comes down to is that story, which I thought was a lie, ends up to be this sort of focal point about what it means to chase a project, to have a calling in life, and to go after it despite the ridiculousness of it, despite all of the opposition that you might find and all the obstacles that you have, and what it means to live with that passion, and then what it means for when that fails too, and what life means in the face of all that stuff. In so much of what this passion project is, it's about making money, and it's about being successful with money. And what we learn once Vincent succumbs to his stomach cancer is that the money doesn't matter at all. And I think, I don't know, so I'm probably talking too long with this, but this movie sets you up to believe it's The Big Short when really it's like Jerry Maguire. And I think that's a really interesting point, that it's a special statement about you follow your calling, but the reality is you figure out what to live for through that journey. And again, now I'm probably even speaking hyperbole, but that's what I felt. That's the good feelings that I felt in following the story of these two, the Selesky brothers.
Yeah, I mean, the cousins. And I think, I agree with your evaluation of Vincent at the beginning in terms of telling the story. I think he's set up to be just this motivated salesman of he's going to do everything he can to get this project made. So he's going to tell his investors whatever story he feels like they need to hear to continue to buy into this project and to continue funding the project, because he is throwing so much money into this every single time. It's, he comes back to him, for more money as they keep hitting these, obstacle after obstacle. And it's entertaining to see sort of the solutions they come up with, or, sort of out of the box of, hey, we don't have access to this. We can't get it. It's on national park land. We can't build an access road. It's like, but hey, there's bodies of water there. We can float this stuff out there. And so there was some interesting and creative, problem solving that I found fit with his character.
What an innovative script, right? About something that is just so seemingly benign, about drilling a pipe. Like, I don't know. I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. So what type of person is he? He's driven and motivated to get this done no matter what. And I think at the beginning, I believe that it's about the money. It's about the financial independence. It's about, as he says, at one point, owning your own freedom, for whatever that means, from his father, and that whole idea. But then, for me, the really pivotal point for this is it's his partnership with Anton, his cousin, who's the coder, the programmer, who's got a problem to solve. He tells him, look, you've got to shave a whole millisecond off of this, because he pitched this on, we're going to be a millisecond faster, and as they start, they're not. It's not. They've got to figure out a way to streamline this, and so it's he and Anton having this vision together as cousins of, we're going to do something monumental. And I'm buying into that the whole way. And then we get a scene with Anton as he's trying to figure out how to get this additional millisecond. And he's in a bar at the hotel, I think, where they've sort of, set themselves up. And there's nobody else there. The waitress comes over and asks him what he's doing, and sort of set up the audio clip here. He breaks down, she's sort of the audience surrogate. He's going to break down exactly what this whole project is. And he explains the whole notion of being a second faster. And she said, well, what's 1 millisecond? He's like, well, I can, basically I can do, this trade, this many things, this many times. And she's like, okay, so you made $10. What is that worth? And then he explains a little bit more, and she asks him a really pivotal question.
I've just made 1,000 times 1 cent. I've made $10.
You're doing all of this for $10?
Well, I do 200,000 transactions like this every day. That's 200,000 times $10 times 252. That's roughly $500 million a year.
It's a lot of money.
Well, it's like time travel.
Yeah. But what about the farmers?
What about them?
Well, the lemon farmers in Zimbabwe, what do they get out of this?
Well, the lemon farmers aren't relevant.
How can they be irrelevant? They're the ones who are growing the lemons.
Well, yeah, but they're not an important variable in this system. Mathematically, for our business plan, they're irrelevant.
Well, I guess I wouldn't want to be one of those farmers in Zimbabwe who's mathematically irrelevant to your business plan. Okay. Sorry. I'll shut up and get back to work.
No. It's an interesting problem. It raises a lot of epistemological questions.
See you, Spy.
So it's his response to her question of, this is, how does he say it? It raises a lot of epistemological questions. It's put him thinking about the fact that she says, well, what about the lemon farmers? And for him, he hasn't even thought about that. And I was watching this with my wife, and we both sort of paused and said, this has entered an entirely different territory, because now Anton's thinking about, well, who are those farmers, and what does this mean, and what is their role in this? Because we can't make money off of these trades if they don't exist. But they're not part of his equation at the current time. It's about this, and all of a sudden, I feel like his whole mind just expanded to, what is this all about? What are we doing, and why are we doing this? Right. And that's where it set itself on, I think, a completely... I felt like the movie started there in terms... it was all set up, and I thought, this is where we get some interesting conversations, because we've seen Vincent now struggling with his stomach cancer. He's basically said he's not going to take any treatment because he's got this project and all these people depending on me. So, like, where is this going to go with these two guys? And there's a bit of a cat and mouse piece to this, because their former employer, played by Salma Hayek, Ava, Torres has found out what they're doing and finds like some bright college student that has come up with his, system, whatever, microwave that's going to be even faster. And so she's got that going. She gives this kid an offer of, I'm going to hire you for $150,000. He's like, wow, that's great. Thank you. If you can make this work by the end of the month, you're going to get a $300,000 bonus. So what kid, he's not going to sleep, right? So we've got that whole plan.
Nope. Yeah.
And this is where we see that come into play, and it works, and they're faster. But Anton has set up sort of a virus or something before they left, and he's able to slow down that whole company's network by 20 milliseconds or something like that. He's put them on the slow track, and Ava finds out, comes to confront Anton about it, and she's threatening him, and he hands over the keys of oh, we'll just call this number and enter this, and you're
Yep.
and you're done. And she's like,
and you're done.
That's it. And he's like, yeah. And she's shocked. She says you could have made billions of dollars. And he says something along the lines of it doesn't matter. It's it's an illusion. The money doesn't matter. For him, it's not about that. And I thought, this is interesting because I think as a programmer, for him, it was probably all about the challenge of, can I make something this fast? What are the limits of what we can do?
The problem.
It's problem solving. And so for him, it's, can I build a system that's faster than that? And they, ultimately they do achieve that. It's obsolete by the time they get there, but they had a goal. They were able to, mission accomplished. They did it. There's now systems that are going to be faster than them, but it's, as their sort of contractor that they work with says, sometimes it's not about the journey. It's about what the people you meet along the way and the choices you make. And I think that's what this is really about for me in some ways of those decisions, those unique projects. And sometimes it's, you may not get the result you want, but what did you learn along the way? But also for me, it's also sort of a commentary on Wall Street, going back to that bartender scene again, of so much of the economy is based on things that are in the abstract. And money is made over these abstractions and who's faster. That has nothing to do with, lemons in Zimbabwe. Right. It's they don't even care what the product is. We're just going to make money because we can make a trade faster. It reminds me of the whole, just recently the whole GameStop, stock trading thing that's going on. Of it's just, what are things worth? Or that's the questions this is asking.
Whatever people will pay for it. That's the thing. And I think the scene that you're talking about with the contractor saying the people along the way, I think that's where this movie, it might lose some people, because honestly, the story doesn't do a great job of bonding those relationships, giving those relationships depth or time. So the fact that they come to that revelation at the end is somewhat unearned based on the story, but it didn't bother me because that actually works with the symbolism of what we're talking about here. In the first 2/3 of the film, while we're setting up this sort of myopic, got the blinders on, just going for this one goal, when underlying all of this are these relationships being developed, all these kind of things that when Anton does make that turn, and when we realize that they are going to fail even in their success as they become obsolete, that's where they still can teach this lesson to us, because we realize that everything that we've been brought through in those first 2/3 of the film was irrelevant, because it's all going to be okay, and everyone is going to be able to move on and be happy with the connections they did make. I mean, of course, Vinny is very sick, but the lesson that he's learned in this process is something that is of value to his life and to the life of everyone around him. I think Anton's relationship with his family is something that's a really good example of that, in that he holes up in a hotel room for months, as what we can tell, right? We don't really have a good sense of the passage of time, but for a long time, and really not even seeing or talking to his wife and his 2 daughters and all these things. And it's really intense, and it's really scary to think that he's getting obsessed to this level of this thing. But after the turn and after all this stuff, he does go to jail and all these things, but he's still with his family's still there, and they're still supporting him through it. And it's this kind of thing of what are the important things in life, and remember those things. And that's why I think the message of this movie turns out to be a really kind of special thing when you look at it from a
and I think when it comes to family and connection, and if we look at sort of Vinny's arc and where he ends and where the film ends, we need to talk about his big obstacle, which is the Amish community that they have to build under, and who refuses
for sure
to sell the land. He explains, look, they're going to be way down. It's not going to be disruptive. Anything, we're going to pay you money, and they refuse. And the quote that sort of stuck with me is this whole thing of like high speed communication. And they're like, look, we don't believe making things faster makes things better. And they don't want to have any part of that, of like, you need to slow down and appreciate things, and which totally just Vinny's what we don't get it. And they find a legal loophole that allows them to be 100 feet down under, because it's for the common good, all of that it's, at that depth, it's not their property. It's, for the public good. But it's that confrontation, which I thought was just another one of the barriers that they had along the way. But the fact that at the end, after, we have that scene with Vinny at Anton's with the family, you can take the girls out for ice cream, that then they go back to the Amish family to tell them that they've removed the line, that it's not under there. And then he decides to help out because it's raining. They're taking sandbags to barricade in a farm or something like that. And he decides that that's the only way he's going to be able to get their attention is, I'm going to become part of your community, because they're busy. They don't have time for him. They don't care about him and his fast life. And so by stepping in, being part of that, he sort of gains their attention, and he's able to explain that. And then we get sort of the final scene, which, it wasn't until I went back to look at scenes again to think about what that the final question he asked, or the final conversation that we see he has with Anton, which was, if his life was only 16 milliseconds long, what would the flap of a hummingbird's wing, what would that be like? And it's so fast. And then Anton's response was, I think it would be the same as if you lived 100 years, that whole idea. And it's like, I guess, and as we see that it's raining and the rain slows, right? It's that whole.
Yes. There's that. And sometimes those extreme slow things as a novelty shot, I don't like. I really liked them in this movie. My favorite shot, there's that, telling the story of, you should slow down to really enjoy yourself. And when Anton is sort of blowing off steam in the hotel and he's hitting tennis balls at an indoor tennis game, there's a shot where, again, they use the symbolism of the line with the tennis, the tennis net across, and it has a ball hit the net and then bounce up. Yeah. And it's held in space and time and backlit, so you have this kind of halo around the ball and this darkness. And again, it shows that even Anton, while he's obsessing about this thing of must go faster, when he slows down, that's where he can actually be himself and feel himself and all that kind of stuff. All of those messages are told through these artful shots in the film. And it can be jarring at times, but I liked the way they did it. I thought it was inspired, so I liked it.
It was, and it's a film that, I hate to say it, but I think it takes like a rewatch, because again, going through, you're expecting one thing, and you're not able to see all these pieces that, like the tennis ball net. It's, first reaction is like, oh, that's a cool shot, and then it's like, okay, it's, Anton is trying to think through and his frustration, all of these things, but about slowing down and taking life at that pace. You don't see all of these pieces until you get to the end and start to reflect back on everything to see what this film is really saying of, it's not about moving faster to be profitable. It's about slowing down. It's about that time with family. All of those pieces, because that's, what do we see Vinny valuing? It's that time with his cousin and, his nieces and all of that. That's the value, being part of a community, not about being the fastest, getting ahead. I mean, it's great.
Making more money.
They did finish the project. He says, hey, we did it. And that's something of value, but we know that, Vinny's last ditch effort to try to save everything is to take out an insurance policy that would ultimately allow them to, not lose all this money, but didn't get executed in time. So his investor is basically losing his company. I mean, there's a lot of loss here. But again, as Anton says, it's all fake. right? I mean, what are the things of value? It's that,
Right.
connection to people and family. And that's not what I expected from this movie at all. I expected all right, they're going to beat the evil corporation, and they're the young scrappy startup that's going to do this, and they're going to, because I think even the opening lines of the film, Vinny's talking I think maybe to Anton and the voiceover talking about Ava and how she just chews up people and spits them out. She just uses people. And we see that of her team and, what they're worth to her. And it's about, they're just as valuable. They're only as valuable as they are when they can make her money, basically. Whereas,
Right.
Vinny and Anton, there's family there, at its core. There's something there. And I won't say that it redeems them ultimately in the beginning, because I think Vinny is it appears that he's motivated by the greed of, hey, we're going to do this. But so much more heart by the time I got to that final scene that I thought, I wish there was a way to highlight this part of the movie more throughout. I wanted more of those pieces.
Right. Well, and they clearly didn't do it in the marketing. They did not highlight that part of the movie in the marketing, and they probably were just trying to figure out how to sell it. But I think it failed it a little bit in that the trailer's not representative of what you're going to take away from this movie. I even if we're talking about who to recommend this to, I do not recommend that you share the trailer with them before you share it with them. I think telling the story of what you know about this movie before watching it, I think, will be more helpful. And then I think for those people who are looking for a break from the high effect, high intensity types of films, I think this is a good one. This is a great Netflix find. This is a great thing to stumble onto on Netflix and watch with your popcorn.
So would you say the story, because we end with Vincent and Anton, is this more Vincent's story or Anton's story? If you had to...
I really like that you asked that question. I like that you asked the question because of the fact that I think the assumption is that it's Vincent's story, Jesse Eisenberg. But I think that I can see where it would be going either way. And because of that, I actually want to retreat and say that it's neither of their stories, that they're actually tools to tell the story of the meanings of the things underlying. You said something really interesting just a moment ago where you said, we get the sense that Vincent is presented as this greedy kind of thing too, but we also have the undercurrents all the time of this sort of personal meaning that he has in the story too. And if you think about, then you've got Vincent and you've got Anton, and they're completely different approaches to the world, and yet they're bound by family, and they have all these things. It's really, I think they are tools from the storytellers here to tell us the story of the meaning of life. And again, that's hyperbole. That's too much about what it's called here, but it's a subtle suggestion for all of us to slow down and to enjoy the things that are most meaningful to us, as opposed to money, success, and all that kind of stuff. So my answer to your question is to not answer your question and to say that it's neither of their stories. It's actually a story that uses them to tell something with greater meaning.
I'll take that. I will take that because.
Do you have an opinion?
No, I think it's, I'll go the opposite and say it's both their stories, because I think we do see them, but we don't.
That's fair.
I think we see them both learn and change and grow a little bit. It's harder to read on Anton because of how that character is written and presented, which is maybe possibly on the spectrum, because he just doesn't. He's very task oriented. He's very rooted in that.
But that Beastie Boys music cue when he figures out how to get to 16 milliseconds is awesome. I agree. Everything you're saying about Anton is right, but I love the Beastie Boys music cue. It was perfect.
And the fact that Vincent, the family connection is so strong, because there are numerous times where something's going on, but Vincent's got to go deal with Anton, whether it's Anton's in prison or something's going. It tells the importance of family to him. Of that's great, but I've got to. He's got this duty to family, and I don't know if it's that he feels personally responsible that he's brought Anton into something that is dangerous, because knowing that Anton's got a wife and kids, that he's got these responsibilities, whereas Vincent's on his own. Right. So if Vincent loses things, there's, he can do whatever. He can bounce back, wherever. But Anton's got these liabilities, right? If he loses everything, his daughters, what's going to happen with them? So it's the relationship between the two, sort of that family connection and responsibility for each other. that to me is a little bit of the heart of this, that it's I guess it's the save the cat, sort of moments for Vincent, that it's, he's got those pieces of, this, and he wants to help Anton accomplish this task of doing something that no one's ever done before. And by the time they get to the end, like I said, Anton has realized that the whole thing, it's all fake, and the money and all that. And I think Vincent's realized the importance of family. So for me, I can see both of them, I see their progression as characters. But yeah, ultimately, I think it is, you're probably right. It's a story about larger ideas and concepts, because I don't think it's possible to strongly identify with either of them. I didn't feel like the way the narrative was structured at all, like I was as emotionally invested in one over the other. You would think that a character with two daughters, I mean, that's my life situation, but I don't identify with Anton because I'm not a coder programmer type of guy that, I didn't get into his motivation as much. And same thing with Vincent. So I struggled to, as we discussed with Papillon, I'm not emotionally invested. I didn't have a swell of emotion at the end of relief.
Yeah, that's where that not choking
right.
Up thing
and I think that's what
there, for sure,
leaves it at 3 stars for me. I think if I had some sense of emotional resonance with something at the end of I'm happy where these guys are. I mean, I can track their projection.
Have I ever cried at a Jesse Eisenberg movie?
No,
I'm wondering if this is a Jesse.
It might
Eisenberg
be a Jesse
problem.
Eisenberg problem. I don't think he's a.
It might be, and I don't think it's I like him. I don't think I like many movies that he's in, but I'm trying to think if there's a time when he's made me choke up. Probably
I don't think
not.
those are the types of roles he goes for. And that's why I looked at Anton, Alexander Skarsgård there to say, okay, as a family man in this, but that's again not the type of journey. I think it's more intellectual than emotional. But the note it ends on, I feel like I wanted some emotional something of relief of like, yes, you guys have been redeemed. You've become about more than money. You've done something, but it doesn't. It's not that type of film. So, and I'm okay with that. It's still a rewarding watch. One that I'm, as I said, I went back and looked at some scenes prepping for the show. It's one that I'll probably watch again, in the next couple of months to just really look at how it's structured, to really look at the flow of the story, to see these elements and how it's put together. It's nothing that I would say is, overly masterful, but I like to see the architecture behind it and of how it gets us, why it's so engaging, because I can't identify, there's not a lot of edge of your seat thriller moments, those, even though we've got Ava spying on them and, I don't get are they going to do it? I mean, I think the most anxious I was Jesse grabbing the chainsaw and marching up the hill. And I'm thinking, dude, you're in the worst physical shape ever. You're dying from cancer and you've got a running chainsaw in your hand. You're going to go march up that mountain to cut down that tower. And he stumbles and falls. I'm like, oh gosh, please, he's not going to lose a limb, right? I mean, this is not that type of movie, please.
This is not that type of movie.
That's probably the funny. Most I was like, where are we going? How dark is this going to get? Because that's where he's at the deep, dark moment of the soul of this is his competition. This is going to destroy his project. So if he can cut the tower down, right? I mean, then, that for him, that's David Goliath type of thing, right? Yeah.
Ava sneaking up on Anton in the hot tub was a tense moment for me too, but I that actually, I mean, just because he seemed very vulnerable at that point. But I will say that was one of my quibbles with the script too, is that she telegraphs everything she's going to do by telling us exactly the story of what's happened to people. And then she does exactly that playbook, which I would have liked rather for her to threaten him with a story and then for her version of it to be either more intense or different in some way, because it doesn't happen immediately, right? It happens, maybe 15, 20 minutes later in the movie. But again, that's just a quibble. That part, I did feel tense at that part too, though, that I was like, oh, she's going to find him anyway.
It's funny in the trivia section or goofs section of IMDb, that's a scene that people pick out. And again, it's one of these things because she sneaks up on him and people say, okay, she startles him and snuck up on him. And then as she's walking around, she's got her heels on and you can clearly hear her heels clacking on the tile floor. And I thought, well, okay, number one, Anton could be deep in thought and tuning everything out. And secondly, they, the Foley artists, that's, they needed to put something in as she's walking around. So yeah, they're going to do that. Yeah.
And it's,
right. Yes,
it's fiction.
Exactly.
So like I'm comfortable with that leap for that moment.
Yeah.
I don't need that much realism to be about the click clack of her heels.
Right, exactly. I mean, she could have taken them off because she was
I
going to
read that
sneak
too.
up on him and club him in the head with the heels. Who
Right.
knows? I don't.
Any of those
Overall,
things.
yeah, this was far more enjoyable than I expected. It goes in a different direction. It's
too.
one that, I'm going to tell people when you're looking for something on Netflix, give this one a try. I don't want to tell them too much, but I think we need to moderate sort of expectations a little bit. Tell them it's not as much, that it's maybe a little bit more about the characters than the thriller aspect. Because that's the one thing that I can see really turning people off.
And they won't catch, people won't catch that on
Yes.
their own. So that's a good thing to mention.
Exactly. Well, JJ, anything else about the Hummingbird Project you want to discuss?
Nope, I liked it. I'm definitely going to recommend it to people.
All right. Well, this is the first in our trio of films that have birds in the title. That's where we're going with the next couple of months. So we've got the Hummingbird Project. We've got 2 more bird titles coming up. We'll see where things go if this trio takes flight for Trailer Rewind in this series of films. So well, we'll just wrap it up. And JJ, great talking with you about the Hummingbird Project, and look forward to talking with you about the next bird titled film. At Trailer Rewind, I scour what is streaming to find the films we discuss on the show. Letterboxd makes it easy to find out which services have the films we are reviewing. Letterboxd also makes it easy to locate films we have watched in the past and see our reviews and ratings. The Next Reel team has built lists of films we have discussed for the main show, the film board, and Trailer Rewind. Right now we have a special offer for our listeners. You can quickly and easily upgrade your free Letterboxd account to Pro or Patron status with a 20% discount at thenextreel.com/letterboxd. If you've already upgraded your account, this discount also works for renewals. After you've used Letterboxd to find a film and watch it, we'd like you to be part of the conversation in our online Discord community. To get started, just go to thenextreel.com/discord. And to keep the conversations going and get some great benefits while you're at it, head over to thenextreel.com/membership and become a supporter of the Next Reel family of podcasts. For less than the cost of a movie rental, you can become a monthly supporter and join us for show live streams as we record, early access to shows in your very own personal podcast feed, and access to member-only channels in Discord. Thank you for listening to Trailer Rewind. Hondo.